My name is Emily. I'm 45 and currently dieting for Thanksgiving. Why? Because last year, I accidentally stored about 7 pounds of turkey fat on my own body. If I lose 7 pounds now, I can afford to gain it back during Thanksgiving, right? What? That's not how it works? Oh well, I tried. From Thanksgiving to Christmas, there's just too much good food. I'll probably even buy myself some Valentine's chocolate soon. Oops, I'm drooling. Looks like I'm set to gain weight after this year. Anyway, today I want to share a winter memory of mine. I hope you'll listen. It happened when I was 25. I had decided to marry my boyfriend Richard, who I had been dating for several years. I introduced him to my dad, James, and my mom, Linda. You know, the typical meet the parents situation. My parents liked Richard, and everything seemed to be going smoothly until a problem arose. My older sister, Susan, who's 2 years older than me, came home from work and was instantly captivated by Richard. It's strange, but sisters can just tell what the other is thinking. Susan had fallen for Richard at first sight. I hoped I was wrong, but Susan blushed when Richard shook her hand. She was always looking up at him when she talked. I thought it was inappropriate for her to act that way towards my boyfriend, but I guess she couldn't help it. I thought she'd eventually put a stop to it, so I ignored it. But after Richard left, Susan cornered me, looking ridiculous in just a bath towel, and said, "You should call off the wedding." She kept bad-mouthing Richard, saying he was a player and that I could do better. But she had no evidence. When I asked her why she thought he was a player, she said, "It's a woman's intuition." Susan has never had a boyfriend. How could I trust the intuition of someone with no experience in relationships? In that case, I believe in Richard's personality, which I have seen with my own eyes for several years. So I brushed off Susan's warning and didn't take it seriously. Richard started visiting my parents' house more often. He said he wanted to get along with my family, so I invited him over without a second thought. My parents were happy, and I had no reason to object to my future husband getting along with them. Everything seemed fine, but Susan was trying to build a good relationship with Richard in a different way. According to Richard, Susan would grab his arm when I wasn't around, press her chest against him, and ask, "Don't you think Emily is childish?" She even tried to show him under her skirt by pretending to trip. Richard laughed it off, saying it was so obvious it was funny. If he had taken her seriously, I would have been very upset. But Susan mistook Richard's politeness for interest and kept making advances. Initially, it was love at first sight, but the fact that Richard had a stable job in a decent company also seemed to attract her. She was not going to give up on a man who was handsome, capable, and guaranteed a stable future. My parents, who should have seen Susan's inappropriate behavior, said nothing. Actually, they've always let Susan get away with anything. To be honest, Susan has always been incompetent. If you ask her to heat up some food, she'll melt a non-microwave safe plastic plate in the microwave. She's bad at studying and sports, especially swimming. She always found excuses to skip swimming classes, like injuring her foot or having a skin rash. She's bad at studying, sports, and even household chores. To be honest, Susan isn't exactly a beauty. But my parents doted on her just because she's the eldest daughter, and instructed me to secretly support her. Yes, secretly. I shouldn't outshine her. I should make her look good. It's unfair, considering we're sisters. Well, maybe my parents felt that Susan was a poor child who can't do anything, and that's why they wanted to protect her. Ironically, I was good at almost everything. I could quickly learn and master new skills. Maybe that made me less endearing to adults. So I even managed to complete the Make Susan Look Good mission effortlessly. There was a time when I pretended to be incompetent outside the house. But after I got through puberty, I started to rebel against my parents, thinking, if I keep this up, I'll fail my exams. If I had continued to listen to my parents, I might have actually become a child who can't do anything. This rebellion made Susan somewhat resentful of me. But we were never on bad terms. We talked normally, and I even gave her advice sometimes. Despite the imbalance of my parents' affection and Susan's hostility, we were still a pretty normal family. But that balance was shattered because Richard didn't reciprocate Susan's feelings. You can't allow this marriage with Richard. The night before the wedding, Susan told our parents.
Come on, Susan, you will get married soon too,
my parents said. Yes, Susan. That's not the point. I want to get married before her. She's too young. But the wedding is tomorrow. Aren't you on my side, Mom? That's not true. I was quietly listening to this disastrous conversation in the hallway. Wait for my sister, who has no romantic experience, to get married first? If I did that, I'd grow old in no time. What on earth is Susan talking about? I thought she'd calm down after venting, but then I heard my dad say,
Fine, your mom and I will skip the wedding tomorrow. Will that make you happy, Susan?
What? I couldn't believe my ears. My mom agreed, practically begging Susan for forgiveness. What? This was beyond doting. It was more like worship. At this point, it's not at the level of doting. But Susan sighed and said, Fine, I'll settle for that. I at least want to make sure your marriage isn't recognized by the family. She really didn't want me to marry Richard, probably because she was in love with him. I couldn't believe it. Because of Susan's unrequited love, my parents were planning to skip my wedding. So the wedding day arrived. Despite it being a sunny day, I was sleep deprived. Not because I was too excited about the wedding, but because I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation between Susan and my parents. I'll never forget the smug smile on Susan's face when my parents officially told me they wouldn't attend. At the venue, I had to tell Richard and my in-laws that my family would be absent. I'm sorry, my sister opposed this marriage, so my family won't be attending, I said. I've never felt so humiliated. Not showing up to your own daughter's wedding. Even my in-laws couldn't believe it. Upon hearing my story, my in-laws fell silent for a moment. Just when I thought the mood couldn't get any heavier on this special day, my mother-in-law Karen took my hand. Soon after, my father-in-law William placed his hand on top of ours. You do have a family here, you know. Don't forget that. Let's not make today a sad one. Come on, smile. Tears filled my eyes at Karen's gentle smile and the warmth of William's hand.
Hey, Emily. I'm your husband, remember? Don't say you're missing family, Richard said, patting my head gently. Don't cry, bride. Don't cry,
my in-laws and Richard hurriedly said. Even as they laughed.
You'll ruin your makeup.
Amidst all this, Karen looked at me in the eyes and said, Emily, I know it's tough with your parents, but this is a good start to your new life. Begin your own family from now on. Karen hugged me tightly, as if to make up for my parents' absence. Richard and William joined in. Everything will be okay, just like Karen said. This is a good start to my new life. I vowed to build my own happy family, and that day, I married Richard without a hitch. Fast forward 15 years. We have one daughter and two sons. Our responsible and capable daughter, Patricia, is a lifesaver, taking care of our rambunctious sons, Robert and Thomas. But man, the way she yells, "Enough already!" She's just like me. Well, it's gone. Life was going smoothly. Richard's job was going well, and we'd bought a house. But then, trouble showed up. My dad, Mom, and Susan. We'd been estranged since the wedding, and hadn't given them our new address. Somehow they found us and showed up at our house. Naturally, my first words weren't, "Long time no see," but, "What are you doing here?" "We have a favor to ask Emily," said Susan. Even my parents chimed in.
Only you can help us.
What's going on? What could they possibly want after 15 years? As I hesitated, not sure if I wanted to hear more, Mom blurted out, "Give Richard to Susan." What? Even Richard, who had come to see what was going on, was stunned. Wait, what? How did we get to give Richard to Susan? I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. Both Dad and Mom looked uncomfortable, while Susan seemed oddly smug.
Susan is still single. She's turning 42 this year.
So what? I was even more confused by Dad's words, and so was Richard.
Actually, Susan recently lost her job because her company went bankrupt.
Oh, that's tough.
I think you can understand why we're worried about Susan's future. She's your sister, after all.
I kept quiet, even though I thought, not really, while looking into my parents' eyes. What are they going to say next? I was more curious than annoyed by Dad's words, so I didn't interrupt.
Susan has always had a crush on Richard, and she's still single. You've already enjoyed your married life with Richard, right? Please let your sister have him for the rest of her life.
What? I looked at Richard, who seemed as stunned as I was, as if his soul had left his body. Ignoring our reactions, my parents pleaded, and Susan remained smug. From her demeanor, it seemed Susan was certain she'd get Richard. Well, our parents always gave her what she wanted. So maybe she's just delusional, but this is too much. As I was pondering this, Richard tugged at me. It seems that the soul has returned.
Hey, isn't this an opportunity?
You mean that?
Yeah, this is exactly like that joke you made when you were drunk.
Should we go for it? We quickly turned back to face Susan and our parents. Do you really like Richard that much? Caught off guard by my question, Susan stammered. Yes. I've always loved him. Really, really loved him. Wow, that's some strong emotion. You've loved him for 15 years, even though he's someone else's husband? Yes, it's been hard, thinking of you two together. We were doing so well. Trying to keep a straight face was hard, given Susan's confident tone, but Richard and I managed. You win, if you feel that strongly. I'll step aside. My parents were the ones surprised by my words. Really? But you love Richard too, Mom exclaimed. Well, the truth is,
I've always been in love with Susan.
Richard chimed in. Susan's face turned bright red. I knew it! I knew you loved me! You never minded when I touched you. And the way you looked at me was so loving, we're finally going to be together. I had to hold back my laughter. Hey, Richard pretending to look down and wipe away tears isn't hiding the fact that you're shaking with laughter. Hold it in. Let's spend the rest of our lives together, Richard. She must have whispered those words to her imaginary Richard countless times over the past 15 years.
I'm happy, Susan. Support me from now on.
Richard smiled. Of course.
Great. I'll quit my job then.
What? Susan's flushed cheeks suddenly paled.
I want to be with you every second, so I'll quit my job and stay by your side.
What?
I won't even go outside. I'd love it if you could accompany me to the bathroom. I'll watch you do housework all day."
As Richard spoke with a grin, Susan froze, then began to panic. My parents also started to lose their composure. "Wait, I'm not working either, so that's going to be a problem."
"Why would it be a problem? We'll be together, so what's there to fear? Even if we don't have money, we'll be happy, right?"
"No, but we have monthly bills like insurance to pay. This isn't some fairy tale."
"So, you can't love me if we don't have money?"
"That's not what I'm saying." Susan's eyes clearly dart around. I quickly said, "Well, Richard, when we divorce, make sure you pay me a hefty settlement, okay?"
"Don't worry, Susan and your parents will cover it."
Richard smiled. My parents turned pale and exchanged glances. "Actually, Susan, taking your sister's husband is just wrong."
"Yeah, Susan, that's crossing a line."
The desperation they had shown earlier had vanished. My parents quickly changed their tune. "What? You promised I'd get Richard. You're not acting like parents."
"Well, Susan, this is a different matter."
"Shut up! Whose side are you on?" Susan became hysterical, pulling Mom's hair while Dad tried to intervene. What a sad scene. Richard and I watched for a moment before he finally spoke.
"Excuse me for being blunt."
Susan and our parents all look at Richard.
"But I'm not attracted to Susan at all. I've been polite because she's Emily's sister, but I really don't like women who make advances on me. It's a turnoff, completely. And the assumption that I like Susan is also a bit. I can't deal with women who jump to conclusions."
Susan and my parents were speechless. "So what was that all about, Richard?" "Could you not call someone else's husband by his first name? Richard doesn't like Susan. We're happily married with kids," I said, restraining Susan, who approached my husband with a pale face. "You tricked me." "Why would you think a man you haven't heard from in 15 years would be interested in you? Are you that naive?" Susan's face turned red as she held back tears. "If you were so charming, maybe, but who would want an unemployed woman living off her parents? You can't even do housework, can you? With those skills, even if you got married, you'd be dumped." I hit her with the hard truth, and Richard laughed in the background. Apparently, I struck a nerve. Susan couldn't stop crying. My parents tried to comfort her, but looked troubled. "So, that's that. We're not giving up Richard."
"Give it up, Susan."
Susan broke down in tears. That's what's embarrassing about her. No growth at all. "Don't contact us again. We're cutting ties. And don't expect any help from us if you're unemployed." With that, I closed the front door. When our kids asked,
"What happened?"
I said, "Seems like a wild animal was making noises, probably looking for food." Robert wanted to go see, but I stopped him. We could still hear Susan's wailing from outside. 5 years later, Susan is still single. She managed to find a job but got fired for making advances on younger coworkers and married men. She's been banned from dating events for her reckless behavior. I'm pretty sure she'll stay single for the rest of her life. No doubt about it. Even my parents, who are retired, are working part-time jobs to save money for her. They probably realize they can't rely on Susan for their future care. Well, they've spoiled Susan so much, they might as well work themselves to the bone to make her realize the consequences. As for me, thanks to my hard-working husband and well-behaved kids, I don't have to worry about tuition or work. I mostly take care of the house and enjoy my days. Well, maybe if I had a job, I could offset the holiday overeating. Or maybe not. My teenage daughter, Patricia, keeps saying she wants to diet, even though she's perfectly slim. I'm doing my best to discourage her. Save that for when you're as wide as Mom, I tell her. My sons, Robert and Thomas, have taken up dancing, and even performed at a local event recently. They've won some awards, and are determined to make it big, like the Jabberwockies. My in-laws visit us regularly and often join us for meals. I say in-laws here, but honestly, I consider them my real mom and dad. They've even suggested going on a resort vacation together during the kids' spring break. I hope they stay healthy and live long enough to enjoy many more days with us. Sure, there were the challenges before we got married, but ever since, it's been nothing but happiness. I finally feel like I have a real family.